It's funny. It's that old saying, right? You have to spend money to make money. And while it sounds so trivial and so old school, the reality is that investing in your people will pay you back.
Running an agency doesn't have to feel like juggling flaming chainsaws. At Schmidt Consulting Group, we help you ditch the chaos, land more clients, and even enjoy running your business again. No fluff, no BS, just strategies that actually work. Check us out at schmidtconsulting.group because your agency deserves better.
Today's guest is Curtis, founder of Mustard Hub, a visionary transforming how businesses understand and lead frontline teams. Tune in as Curtis shares insights on how to beat employee turnover and build stronger, smarter organizations.
All right, everyone, welcome to Schmidt List. I'm your host, Kurt Schmidt. I'm so happy you're here joining me this week. I've got a very special guest, my new bestie, Curtis, because of a great name, by the way. Curtis, say hello.
Hello. Thank you. Thanks for having me here today, Kurt. I did notice that you spell your name wrong with a K.
No, that's actually the correct way. Is with the K is what I understand. We can agree to disagree there.
There you go. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me here on the show. I'm the founder and CEO of Mustard Hub. And really the simplest way, I guess, to describe what it is that we do, we make the behavior of frontline and distributed workforces very visible to the people responsible for leading them. And we can get into more about what that means in a bit, but I think in a succinct way, that's kind of what we do. A little bit about my background early in my career. I spent 15 years on the jazz circuit playing and teaching music. I founded an education company about 2 decades ago that I scaled across the country. I built a roll-up portfolio in the space, and I exited all those ventures very early in 2025 just to focus on Mustard Hub, which we'd been building for about 2 years at that point. So that brings us to today.
All right. And so what was the driving force with starting this? Was it you saw a gap or you had a passion? Both? Well, tell me more about that.
Both. So our workforce that we had been leading of musicians, of teachers, folks in the education space, it grew considerably over the years. And we suffered from, I'd say, what a pretty typical picture of turnover looked like in most frontline industries. And then right around when COVID hit, it forced us to rethink our people strategy, how we went about hiring people, how we went about interacting with them on a daily basis, just our general people ops.
Yep.
And to your question, yes, I do have a general passion for leadership and working with people. I'm a people person, I feel like, but also I think most of my leadership decisions are driven by the people that we work with. I know that they're always going to be the backbone, right, of any organization that you're running. And in an organization with so many frontline workers, right, they are the face of your business.
Yeah.
So COVID brought a lot of challenges, and we really wanted to reinvest in our people. As we were measuring performance, it probably comes as no surprise that those educators, those staff members that we worked with who stayed longer, right, wound up doing that much better for the organization. The organization thrives, right, as our turnover went down. And the more our turnover went up, not only were we churning staff members, but client relationships also disintegrated rather quickly. And it's not like that in every high turnover industry, right? I mean, at the cupcake shop, folks aren't necessarily going to stop going there simply because the person at the cashier doesn't work there anymore, right? But in organizations with really high touch staff and customer relationships, it can often mean whether or not a customer sticks around. So we vetted a lot of different types of engagement softwares, most of which, in fact, all of which were built on an enterprise model trying to sell to small businesses. In fact, it's still that's all it is now, right? I mean, engagement software kind of came in vogue, 15 years ago-ish.
Yep.
And it was built for the enterprise model right out of the gate. And now it's become fairly commoditized, and every entrant is essentially building similar software and competing on price maybe, or they're feature flagging and how they gate them, right, to sell to the small business customer. And it simply doesn't work for the small business realities and how they govern their P&Ls. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
And as much as we vetted all of the existing software on the market to better engage our people, we really discovered that this would be something that it would be more effective if we just built it internally. And it also didn't have to be pretty. We could build it into our system, right? And so we did that. We built it on top of proprietary software we already owned. And then it gave us the ability also to measure data points in a variety of different ways we never would have been able to do with some third party out of the box, right, software system. So we did that. After year one, our turnover dropped 80 percentage points. Top line grew about 42.5% in year one. So a lot of the bets that we made, it's not like it was cheap, right? But we made a big bet on our people, and it really paid off. And so we started that in our flagship org, and then we rolled it out portfolio wide, right? In the roll up that I had, and we had the same results everywhere. So at that point in time, I made the decision to productize it. And the irony here, and I do feel it is a bit ironic, is it wasn't necessarily intended to spin off, to be its own thing for mass consumption. The goal that I had was to just give it to all my competitors. The reason why is that I'm very much a firm believer of, if others in my space are doing well, then I'm doing well, because it makes the space look good. If others in my space are doing terribly, that's essentially going to turn off customers entirely to the whole category. And so I had a great relationship.
More people have that attitude.
Right. A rising tide, right? And that's generally my attitude. And I had good relationships with most of my competitors. And from time to time, we'd talk, we'd interact, we'd go grab a beer together if we were local, and we'd try to help each other out. And I built this as a standalone so that they could use it and have a similar experience, right? Where there could even potentially be some portability, right, for the earned value that some of these folks would have on our platform. It was a little bit of a novel idea, right, at the time, this idea of portability. But that was essentially the reason why I productized it. Although my first, and I'll shut up here in a second. Although my first customer out of the gate was my kids' preschool. Because about literally a couple of weeks before we launched it, they lost another teacher. And so I went to the owner and we just had a real discussion. And I said, hey, look, I don't know if I can help you here. I mean, we're sticking around. We love this place and we love the people here. And I know you do too. I built this thing and it could be helpful for you. They jumped on 2 weeks later and they've been using it ever since still.
That's awesome. And I have so many questions for you, Curtis, because as a business owner in the past, when I had a large team and things, we, just like you mentioned, we installed lots of engagement things, right? And there was everything from more enterprise version-y looking things to basically some version of like a Tamagotchi HR thing, like little Slack bots and things that did stuff. And I think one of the biggest challenges was, again, as something I bring up a lot, the audience will probably be sick of me saying this, but tools don't fix culture. And how does your tool increase that engagement? Because the thing is I've had that experience where I'm like, we're going to bring in this thing that's going to help with engagement, but nobody engages with it.
Right. Well,
so what's your approach there?
No, I appreciate you bringing that up. And probably the way I would start to answer this question is with some reframing around what it is that Mustard Hub is.
Sure.
The story originates from an engagement, like that's part of the origin story. But Mustard Hub itself is embedded behavioral infrastructure for the workforce. So we don't sell software to employers. We integrate inside platforms that they already use, ATS, payroll, compliance, vertical SaaS. And we're built to generate this continuous behavioral signal that those systems were never designed to produce. So to sort of double click on that, workforce platforms today are built to capture transactions, and they do a phenomenal job of it, right? Hires, terminations, hours, payroll runs, compliance events. They're very good at that. But what they don't see is the behavior that drives those events, right? The behavior upstream that drives those outcomes. And like the disengagement that precedes a resignation or somebody quitting, right? The sentiment shift that precedes that no-show, all the participation, drops, et cetera. So by the time that those things show up in transactions, it's generally too late to act on them. And what Mustard Hub does, we embed inside these platforms and we fill that gap. We can use engagement in different types of engagement indices and in some gamified reinforcement, some sentiment inputs, et cetera, to create sustained behavioral interaction.
Okay.
And that interaction generates signal. The signal predicts attrition early enough to intervene. And so that's essentially where we live, is in generating this signal. Our primary output is AI predictive insights. Who's a flight risk and when, right? What's their risk trajectory and index, and quantify the financial impact of that exit. And so again, origin story is in engagement, but Mustard Hub is built as infrastructure, and that infrastructure embeds in these systems to generate that signal that they were never designed to produce.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And so why does somebody need this? I mean, this kind of goes back to the question I want to ask you is what are the common mistakes you're seeing people make in these management and in these people management things? And does this help them? But is there a specific problem that people have, or is it the same problem? Is it a multitude of problems? What is it when they are like, yes, I need this?
Well, I think, Kurt, I would probably call it a $1 trillion problem, right? That's what churn is costing U.S. SMBs every year. I would say so. SHRM estimates the cost of hire at roughly $4,500 an employee, and that's simply for recruiting, right? You tack on another $1,000 to $1,400 in onboarding costs, and then with your loss of productivity, generally employees are only operating at about 25% efficiency for generally the first 4 weeks, right? That's a sort of a measured estimate, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at about $7,200 all in for the cost of an individual employee churning. Now, in some high turnover industries, your cost of recruiting is arguably half, right? So, okay, so $4,500. And if you're operating a business with 50 people, with 1,000 people, with 2,500 people, right? SMB means different things to different people. You can quantify that financial impact, and that becomes incredibly painful. So at a 2,500 person mid-market company that's churning at 80%, right? There's a lot of mid-market retail out there with majority frontline and distributed workforces that are operating at roughly 80% turnover. Well, if you have 2,500 people and you're losing 2,000 of them a year, that's putting your burden, your churn burden at close to $14 million a year. I mean, walking through the math like that kind of forces it into your face how painful that is. And I think that you asked, what are they doing wrong? Are they doing something wrong? Well, yes and no, but it depends on a lot of factors. I mean, the micro, smalls, more franchise style businesses, a lot of them are led by former employees who felt like they could bake a better cupcake, right? They start their own business. They have very little experience leading people or leading organizations. That doesn't make them bad managers. It just makes them inexperienced managers, right? And When operators lack the people experience, your first instinct is to cut things to make your margins look better, right? Rather than investing in your people, right? Who are the ones that are essentially the face of your business,
Right.
right? So a lot of it could be management, could be training, could be onboarding, could be a lot of different things, could be the engagement, right? So that's kind of hard to give a blanket statement about. But I think that the problem that we recognized in the market, right, is, again, these systems that we use every day, they are very good at recording transactions, and that's what they were built to do. It's not any kind of deficiency on their part. It's simply a structural limitation of theirs, that there's zero visibility into the behaviors upstream that affect those outcomes. And so what we decided to do, and this was a pivot, right, a couple of years ago, is to create that infrastructure for those platforms so that they can help these managers, employees, operators, and give them operator-ready data, information, analytics, and insights that they can act on.
So how do you determine which platforms you integrate with? Is it based on, like, how are you making those decisions?
Well, I think that right now we are still in that phase where we've obviously HR and HR adjacent platforms, I think, tend to be the most likely, I think, of targets for us, right? But I think that as we look at different segments, right, we maybe are talking about different products, for example. We have different ways to integrate and embed our system, everything from really simple partner links and SSO to white label infrastructure to embedded API, right? And with larger HCMs that may have certain elements that our infrastructure has, maybe the goal isn't necessarily to white label a system, but to use that pure embedded API, that infrastructure where we can ingest data and process it through our AI models and then provide the output, right, that they can render is one option, right? But you look to other organizations who lack significant engagement capabilities and want to white label the whole entire thing so that they can own that under their brand. And
Makes
so ATS, compliance, payroll, HRIS systems, full HCM ecosystems, et cetera, really make great candidates for those types of things.
Yeah.
Others like workforce SaaS or workforce ops and vertical SaaS maybe sometimes lack engineering power, right, to do that. And so we have lower lift, lower resource, like partner link and SSO that makes it really simple and really easy to do.
Yeah, I get that. So who's the user of this? Is it, like you mentioned, if it's a 20-person place, it's probably the founder, right? But is the majority of the people you're working with have a dedicated HR?
That's a good question. It very much varies. So I'd say probably a lot of the sub 75 person, sub 100 person teams, there's an operator. There could be a dedicated HR practitioner. Oftentimes it could be someone in an ops role who also owns that HR responsibility. They're the ones going to be responsible for setting it up. But it's very much a flywheel, right? Like a lot of engagement software, the infrastructure side of it, right? Once you get that going, I mean, it generally runs itself. You have folks interacting on the platform. Once your systems are connected, right, we're able to pull in data from a variety of sources, right? So it's not like most engagement software that require continuous usage on a daily basis in order to be effective and to be able to provide really like robust predictive insights. The interaction can be episodic while the insights and signal that we're generating is perpetual, right? So that's actually one of the really nice things about it is that it relies less on heavy team activity, right, in order to produce that continuous signal. Does that make sense?
It does. No, it makes sense. Well, that kind of goes back to my question about like, how do you get people to engage with the software? And it sounds like it doesn't need like a big, oh, now this is part of your daily job is to
exactly.
To answer a how are you feeling question today, you know?
Exactly. It doesn't. And just to go a step further, right? If there's an HCM platform that embeds the API infrastructure, that's pure infrastructure, right? You're not really even white labeling the part of the engagement infrastructure. That's just data flows, right? Bidirectionally.
Yeah.
So in some cases, there may not even be an engagement platform to engage with, right? Depending on how the platform chooses to integrate with us. So, but yes, I mean, there is some engagement infrastructure there. There are a lot of ways on that platform that teams can interact with each other that can generate a lot of signal, but it's not necessarily required on a daily basis in order to be extremely effective.
Okay. So how are you eating your own dog food, as they say in Silicon Valley, right? Like what have you learned about being a better manager and a better leader running an organization that helps people be better managers and better leaders?
Yeah. Well, we do. We use it every day, and it becomes less, what's the word I'm looking for? It feels less chore-like, right? The more that you do it, it becomes a lot of fun, and we really enjoy it. I will say that the interesting thing, what helped me become a better manager, I'll preface this by saying I am not a data scientist. That is not my domain of expertise. However, as I work with these incredibly talented, very technical team members that I work with, every day we're working to improve these systems. And we're forced to really evaluate, right? Because again, we generate predictive insights, right? And we quantify what that financial impact will be, right? And what we can do about it, right? Recommendations, recommended actions, right? For different folks. And so it forces us to really critically evaluate the efficacy of each and every output that we see and measure it against our own behaviors, our own intuition, right? We have real conversations with folks about this, right? Because we're building it, but then we also start to see, right, these insights that it will yield. So I can sit down with Luca or Serge, Alex, Yvonne, any of these folks and look at these insights and say, this is what it's telling me. How do you feel about that? And it's forced me to really look at and evaluate how I'm doing what I'm doing in a little bit of a different way. You might imagine a manager might look at some of these things and take it at face value. Well, that's great because the software has been created for them, but I'm actually the one building it. So I have to look at it through a different, sort of more critical lens.
Right. Yeah. And how do you do that? I mean, what does that process look like for you?
I'm still learning, Kurt. I'll be the first to tell you that I don't have it figured out. It's a nascent space. Behavioral workforce intelligence is a category that really didn't exist 5 years ago because the infrastructure to generate signal at scale embedded inside platforms that employers use didn't exist. And we're building this category. It forces us to rethink a lot of different things. One of our core values is burn the box, right? What does that mean? Well, a lot of times we tend to think inside of a box. And so the whole goal here is to not even think outside of the box, is to imagine that a box just never existed in the first place.
Yeah, sure.
Right? And so this idea of behavioral workforce intelligence, right? The continuous capture and structure of post-hire employee behavior into some predictive signal and measuring the event, the behaviors that happen between events, right?
Yeah.
It's a shift in thinking from reactive to predictive, right? Obviously, we have this capability now with AI, and so to your question, how do you do that? I think we're learning every day. I'm learning new things about my team every day. I'm learning how to have conversations I never thought I'd have before, and the conversations are they're genuinely led by curiosity and exploration. In a lot of HR, you're often having a conversation about something that happened, past tense.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is the biggest difference, right? Is that you walk into HR when someone said something or someone did something or you need time off or something happened,
reactive.
right? Yeah.
Very reactive.
BWI tells you what's about to happen while there's still time to do something about it. And so this is where it gets really, really interesting. And so when I have the answer to that question you asked, I'll make sure to come back and tell you next episode.
Well, there's lots of books out there. People try to answer that question, right? That's the next question I was going to ask you. I mean, what sort of activities and things do you do to, what sort of mindset for you to be a better leader and manager? How do you approach it? What's your philosophy?
Well, engagement software in a vacuum by itself is not going to improve relationships, right? It takes people. Software is there to augment, right? It's there to help facilitate some interactions. My team is fairly small, and it's important that I do one-on-one time with all of them, but either weekly or biweekly. And that's really valuable time to get really personal perspective on not just things that we're doing inside of the organization, right? But the interactions between everybody and how things can be improved, right? Or frankly, what we're doing right, also getting that validation from a lot of the folks, right? And even what they feel like they can improve on or do differently or what they want to bring to the table. I work with some incredibly smart people, and we really try to push these values that we have. And what's nice is you start to see everybody being an idea person, right? Even though for some folks, it's not, maybe they don't consider it their strongest asset, right? But you put everybody in this position to have a voice, right? To feel that sense of belonging and to contribute, right? No one is just clocking in and clocking out, right? We're all sort of contributing to the greater good. And if one person is not pulling in the direction that they need to, the whole thing doesn't work. And I think it's instilling that mentality that in order for this to function and move forward, everybody has to pull in the same direction and has to do their part. And when one person doesn't, it all falls apart. And I think when all of your team embodies that, right, and feels that sense of responsibility, amazing things can happen, and we're able to make magic happen. And that's another one of our big things, right? And we all, I think, we all take that kind of ownership, you can move mountains.
The greatest skill I think I had as a manager was just curiosity,
Yeah.
And that was enough to get me through my early years as a manager because I was really bad at it. I got better at it. But that's the thing is like the story goes, right? Like people forget jobs, people forget projects, but you never forget your manager.
It's true. And it's not an exact science. I know that people will look to their leaders and their managers for answers, but I also think that one of the things that managers and leaders can do to earn the most respect is demonstrate humility. And when you don't know, being honest about that,
right,
is going to do wonders for the respect that your team gives you, because you're not just bullshitting people.
Yeah, right.
Am I allowed to say that? Hopefully that's okay.
Yeah, you're right. This is not for kids. But I would say with that in mind, Do you see what's coming because of, like you said, like this tool helps predict some of these things? Is there commonality, like what people should be looking out for? Are there trends? Is it different for every place? Like what has the last couple of years taught you?
That's a good question. And yes, there's trends. Yes, it's taught me a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think that it's a really interesting age that I think we are running into, right? We're not really crawling or walking into it. I think we're at a full-on sprint. When we talk about behavioral intelligence, I think a critical distinction I should make is that we're not really talking about workforce surveillance.
Sure.
And it's important, I think, to bring up this
Oh,
distinction.
you're not the Pentair of HRs? That's not on your website?
No, I mean, it's out there. And there's a lot of discussion about it.
Yeah.
In fact, I wrote an article not that long ago about workforce surveillance and what that looks like compared to analytics, for example. When you ask what's coming down the pike, well, yeah, there's a fair amount of software that's being developed to surveil the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that privacy concerns are real and legitimate. So it's an important topic to discuss. I think it's important to focus on what signal actually is, right? The data that predicts disengagement and sort of voluntary attrition is what I consider metadata level and not content level. In other words, I'm not reading your messages, but I can tell your participation patterns, like how often someone's engaging with something, right? I can also read transactional data that already exists, right, in these HR systems, how often you change managers, if you ever get pay raises or not, how often you take your PTO, right? These things that data can read and that they can process along with more metadata level participation patterns and engagement drift, the connection topology, the who interacts with things and how often and how that web changes over time. These are things that don't really invade people's privacy. Reading your Slack messages will invade your privacy. We don't do that, right? And so, but that software does exist. So it's interesting that you ask that question, because I think ultimately it brings up the conversation of what responsible insights actually mean. And again, we're sprinting into this new age where a lot of things are possible.
Yeah.
And so those are some things that I'm seeing that's very interesting. Everybody's looking to adopt AI in different ways. Everybody is, you'll hear I'm sure you probably hear this all the time, right? Leaders will come to you saying, I want AI in my system. Okay, well, what do you want it to do? I don't know. I just want it. Everybody else has it. We need to have it. Right? So,
yeah, we want AI. When do you want it? Now. What do you want it to do? We don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So these are obviously things that I think are important to discuss. How data is used, if it's used for people versus being used on people. I think that those are the big conversations that kind of need to be happening now.
Yeah, I would agree. So if you had some advice for managers, leaders today after the last few years of doing this, what would you tell them?
Well, my advice to the operators who are running the businesses might be different from those.
Yeah, well, give me both.
The platforms themselves that are helping the people running the businesses, but it's not easy to see around corners, and unless you have some really helpful software that or infrastructure that can help facilitate things like that.
Yep.
Doing things the old-fashioned way means doing a lot of listening, a lot of patience, and a lot of listening. And it's a small thing, but it's a big thing, right? Listening means so many different things, from how you run your business to what somebody might need in their personal life, or so that there's a variety of things that I think operators and business owners beyond. I think that things stretch beyond the numbers that you see on the page, right, on your P&L.
Yep.
And one thing that I learned, I think, from running all those businesses is that it's funny. It's that old saying, right? You have to spend money to make money. And while it sounds so trivial and so old school, the reality is that investing in your people will pay you back. I think there's some statistic out there, maybe from Sherm. It was like, for every dollar you invest in your people, it pays you back 4. And that's not a joke. I mean, that is a for real thing. And I think where everybody is trying to cut, there's an argument for investing in your people in some different ways, right? That doesn't mean that people, look, sometimes downsizing is a necessary evil. I'm not going to sit here and say that people shouldn't or can't do that, and you should always be hiring more and invest more in your people. No, what I'm saying is that there is a place to be investing in your people, right? And in your workforce. And I think when done properly, those things are going to pay significant dividends. And generationally, right, we all have different needs.
Mm-hmm.
The millennials, boomers who are still in the workforce, Gen X, left myself out of that one. We all need different things. And I think that that's where a lot of the listening comes in. There isn't really a one size fits all for everyone. And those great managers and those great operators, the people that you remember, right, that, like you pointed out, those are the folks that listen intently and really want to do right by their people.
Yeah.
And so that's really kind of the best advice that I can give them.
I love it. I think it's very sound advice.
So,
well, Curtis, I want to thank you for taking the time on your busy day. Join me. If I want to get in touch with you, if I want to learn more about the product, if I want to connect with you, where's a good place to go?
Awesome. Well, I love that. Yes. And thank you, Kurt, for having me here. Yeah. You can visit mustardhub.com to learn more about Mustard Hub. You can find us on LinkedIn as well. We're on Substack at behavioral workforce intelligence.substack.com. Feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to me directly, Curtis at mustardhub.com. And would love to hear from everybody and interact in the public sphere.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Curtis. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to Schmidt List. If you found this episode useful, a quick review goes a long way. To learn more about the work Kurt does helping businesses grow with more clarity and profit, visit schmidtconsulting.group. Have a great week.